1. The fourth stall. Every school has a haunted bathroom story, but I never believed them, until I had to serve detention alone. The school was silent as I walked down the dimly lit hall toward the boys' bathroom. My sneakers squeaked against the old linoleum as I pushed the door open. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering slightly. It smelled like mildew and rust. Something about the air was off, too cold, as if I had walked into a freezer. I stepped up to the urinal when I heard it, breathing, slow, ragged, coming from the last stall. I turned my head slightly, my pulse quickening. The stall was locked from the inside. Someone in there?" I called out. No answer, just that horrible, slow inhaling and exhaling. I bent down slightly to check for feet under the door. There were shoes, a pair of black dress shoes, facing the toilet. I stepped back. "Hey man, are you okay?" The breathing stopped. I felt the weight of something watching me. A suffocating stillness filled the room. My skin prickled. Then, the shoes turned. They didn't shuffle, didn't lift. They just pivoted, so they were now facing me. My stomach dropped. I bolted to the door, slamming into it, shoving it open so hard it nearly came off its hinges. I didn't stop running until I reached the main hall. The janitor was there, locking up. He saw my face and frowned. "You okay, kid?" I think someone's in the bathroom," I stammered. His expression darkened. "Which one?" "The old one, by the art wing." He exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. "That stall's been locked for 20 years. Some kid hung himself in there. And those shoes?" He swallowed hard. "You're not the first to see them."
2. The handprint. I always thought the Bloody Mary games were stupid. The idea of summoning a ghost in a mirror was something middle schoolers did to spook each other. So when my friends dared me to try the school's version, whisper "I see you" 3 times in the girls' bathroom mirror, I just laughed and did it. I stood before the dirty, cracked mirror and whispered it. "I see you. I see you. I see you." Nothing happened. I smirked and turned around to leave. Every single stall door was open. I hadn't heard them move, hadn't even felt a breeze. But they were all open now, perfectly aligned. Then, one by one, the toilets flushed themselves. A slow, deliberate sequence, from the stall farthest from me to the nearest one. I felt a sudden pressure around my chest, like something was squeezing me, holding me in place. I tried to move, but my feet wouldn't budge. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. Then I saw it. A wet handprint forming on the mirror in front of me. Not appearing instantly, but slowly pressing into the glass from the other side. Long, thin fingers stretching toward my reflection. I finally broke free, stumbling backward out the door and crashing into my friend. Later that night, I noticed something on my wrist. Bruises. Long, thin, finger-shaped bruises. 3. The crying girl. The first time I heard the crying, I thought it was a real student. It was late after school, and I was near the old gym when I passed the restroom. The door was slightly ajar, and from inside, I heard soft sobbing. It sounded like a girl, young, scared, and alone. I hesitated, then pushed the door open. "Hey, are you okay?" I called. The crying stopped immediately. I stepped inside. The air smelled damp, like wet hair left to mold. The light above flickered. Every stall door was closed, except for the last one, which was slightly ajar. I stepped forward. A cold drip landed on my shoulder. I looked up. The ceiling was wet. Then, the sobbing started again. But this time, it was right behind me. I spun around, and for a split second, I saw her. A little girl with long, dripping wet hair. Her mouth was open, a silent scream stretching her face unnaturally wide. I blinked, and she was gone. I ran. Later, I learned the school once had an indoor pool. Years ago, A little girl drowned in it when the teachers weren't watching, and now she still cries.
The writing on the wall. It started with a rumor. People said that if you used the second-floor bathroom near the abandoned science wing, you'd see writing appear on the stall doors, words scratched into the wood while you watched. I never believed it. But one night, I stayed late for detention, and my teacher let me take a bathroom break. The newer restrooms were locked, so I had no choice but to go to that one. The second I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. It smelled of mildew and rust. The air was stale, thick, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, as if the space around me was too empty. I did my business quickly, but as I washed my hands, my eyes drifted to the stall door behind me. There was a single word, deeply carved into the wood. Leave. I stepped closer, heart pounding. The letters were fresh, splintered wood curling outward. I reached out. The edges were warm. Then I heard it, a long, slow scratching sound. I froze. It wasn't coming from inside the stall. It was coming from behind me. I turned back to the mirror, and my stomach dropped. There was a reflection in the glass, but it wasn't mine. A shadow stood behind me, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It had no eyes, just empty black sockets. The scratching sound grew louder. I turned back to the stall door just in time to see new letters carving themselves into the wood, deep and deliberate. Too late. A sharp, suffocating whisper filled the room, coming from all around me. You shouldn't be here. The light flickered, and in that split second of darkness, I felt something move behind me. The whisper turned into a breath against my neck. Cold. Wrong. I ran. I burst into the hallway, slamming the door behind me. The janitor saw me, his face paling. You went in there, he asked. I nodded, shaking. He sighed, rubbing his temples. They never cleaned that bathroom after the accident, he muttered. I swallowed hard. Accident. He glanced at the door, then back at me. Kid went missing in there years ago, he said. No one ever found him. Then he paused, lowering his voice. But sometimes, people say, he writes. The janitor's warning. I was leaving school late when I realized I needed to use the restroom. The hallways were nearly empty. The only person around was the janitor, locking up for the night. Hey, where's the bathroom? I asked. He didn't even look up. Not that one, he muttered. Use the new one. I frowned. Why? He paused, then shook his head. Just don't go in there. Of course, I ignored him. The moment I stepped inside, the temperature dropped. The air was thick, stale like an old basement. The smell of damp concrete filled my nose, mixed with something else. Something rotten. The single light overhead flickered, buzzing loudly. Then I heard it. Dragging. A slow, wet pulling sound, as if something heavy was being dragged across the floor. I swallowed hard. Hello? Silence. I turned to leave, but as I reached for the door, creak. A stall door at the end of the row swung open. Just a crack. My breath hitched. The floor beneath the stall was completely dark, as if there was no bottom at all. Just a void. And then the feet stepped into view. Pale. Bruised. They were bare, the skin mottled with deep purple patches. The toenails were blackened. I backed away, my heart pounding. The feet shifted forward, dragging across the tiles. The stall door creaked wider, revealing nothing but blackness inside. Then a hand slid out. Long fingers. Too long. The nails were jagged, broken, caked with something dark. I ran. I shoved the door open and nearly crashed into the janitor. He caught my shoulders, eyes sharp. I told you, he hissed. You didn't listen, did you? I couldn't speak. I turned to point at the bathroom, but the door was shut. Completely. The janitor sighed, rubbing his face. They don't like visitors. I swallowed. Who is they? His face darkened. I shuddered. Then, whose feet were those? The janitor stared at me for a long time. His eyes grew hazy as he hissed, Stay out. We told him to keep you out. The last thing I saw was his body dropping to the floor as I ran away.